Hello and welcome to another Witch Please Patreon bonus interview. We have a very special double interview for you today. Wait, normally at the beginning of this, I say who I am. I'm Hannah. Marcelle, who are you?
I'm Hannah. I'm also Marcelle.
Yeah, you know what? It's confusing, but I honestly, if you're a Patreon supporter, you probably should know what our voices sound like at this point.
Confusing, but on brand.
Yeah, confusingly on brand and on brandingly confusing. So our guests today are Kiana and Vicky. So Kiana reached out to us via Twitter asking if we could have a conversation about the ongoing protests in Iran. And we also connected with Vicky, who is actually zooming in right now from Tehran in Iran. And they're going to chat with us about the ongoing protests. Thank you so much, Kiana and Vicky, for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. I'm so glad to be here.
Why don't we start? Kiana, can you tell us about the organization that you reached out to us to talk about?
Yeah, so me and another woman who we were protesting together here in the UK since the beginning of the protest, which was when Mahsa Amini, the 22-year-old Kurdish girl, was killed whilst in custody of the morality police. We met during the protests and we realized that we have the same goals. You know, we want to hold UK government accountable for make sure they support Iranian people and not continue supporting the Islamic Republic regime, which is the sort of thing they're kind of doing, and raise awareness and make sure, everyone knows what's going on and kind of give our point of view as Iranians to, people here in the UK. So yeah, that's what our organization basically does. And, we have leaflets, posters, we go on like shows like yours to do interviews. We have a radio show, we organize protests. So yeah, anything that can raise awareness.
And I'm so sorry, can you tell us what your organization is called again?
So it's Women for Liberty of Iran, but we just call it Women for Iran for short because that's quite long.
Amazing. So you just gave us a lot of background information, and I'm going to ask if we can pause and go back for anybody who is listening right now who has not been following the story. I mean, I hope everybody listening is at least aware that there are major protests happening right now in Iran. But can we talk a little bit more about Mahsa Amini and why it was that her death sparked this particular moment of protest?
Yeah, I think that would be a really good question for Vicky to answer because she can give perspective from inside of Iran.
So for the past 40 years, I think the protests against hijab started right at the inception of the Islamic Republic. And people have been protesting this for a very, very long time. But what really led to this, as a lot of analysts and experts have called it, the powder keg moment, was the death of Mahsa Amini in custody of the morality police. So the morality police has existed in Iran for the past 40 years in different shapes and forms and under different names. And they have constantly rebranded and given themselves different names and operated under names like the Jandullah Patrol, or something colloquially known as Committee, and later on Gasht Irshad, which means the Guidance Patrol, and later it again rebranded to Moral Safety Police in Farsi.
All of these names are so sinister.
Yes. And a lot of people are saying the next one might be something like Modesty Police or Modesty Patrol or stuff like that. So they have enforced mandatory hijab with violence for 40 years. And they just kept getting away with it because people had like quote unquote more important concerns about like at first it was the Iran-Iraq war, and then like economic issues, and then there was economic issues, and again economic issues, and all of that.
Yep.
But then I think what really led to people like this being very important in people's psyche was that the police introduced this new law that if a woman was unveiled in a car, that car would get fined, and if that transgression was repeated 3 times, they would confiscate their cars, put them in government parking lots, and the only way to get your car back from the government was if you attended like morality and guidance classes from the police. So yeah, and that was like a very big issue in Iran. So what happened was that like this is a very patriarchal society, and that would mean that a lot of property and assets are owned by men mostly. So most of the cars getting fined and confiscated were owned by the men in the family. So now men were being punished for transgressing on hijab laws. And for the first time in a very long time, they were, they understood how much of an inconvenience it is and how unfair it is that we have to get punished for something we don't believe in. And I think like that, along with closing down businesses that allowed women to attend like without hijab, like cafes and restaurants, or fining and confiscating cars from gig worker drivers, like from the Iranian version of Uber, which is called like Snap and Tapsi. All of these really just, they pitted women and men against each other, essentially, and try to financially reprimand and punish people for transgressing on hijab laws.
And I'm sure financially incentivize men to attempt to reinforce the laws themselves.
Exactly, like do their work for them and police women so they could like protect their livelihoods, let's say. But that led to a lot of tensions, especially on social media, and women were starting to be very conscious of not wearing the hijab and trying to unveil as much as possible. Then at the beginning of summer, around the beginning of July, I think, there was this video of this chadori woman. Chador is the Islamic Republic uniform and preferred form of hijab. It's a very long black fabric that is meant to be worn above a headscarf, and then long shirt dress and long pants and socks and all of that. So Chadori women are sometimes seen as supporters of the regime, and we have seen videos of them constantly arguing with or cursing at women who they believe to be immodest, let's say. So this video surfaced of this Chadori woman bad-mouthing and arguing with this girl out of frame that was supposedly not wearing the hijab. And they were on a bus. Passengers were arguing with her, saying like, it's none of your business, let her go, and stuff like that. And she was also filming this argument. And then this video went viral and people were very upset over the situation. And the next day, or like the day after, a girl was arrested called Sepide Rashno, and she was believed to be the woman out of frame in the video. And what had happened was definitely that this woman who was filming had reported her to the authorities, and she was promptly arrested. And when people expressed concerns over her whereabouts and like the reason she was arrested, after a week or so, she appeared on TV very emaciated with this like sickly face that, showed signs of possible torture. And she gave out this forced confession, confessed to her crimes, and said like she was agitated by outside forces and stuff like that to do these things or say these things that was revealed that she said on Twitter, like she had expressed anti-government sentiments. So that really enraged the public. That forced confession video really enraged the public. And a lot of feminists organized this movement of appearing without the hijab on the streets, like completely without hijab, not just like removing the headscarf, but like going out with a jean and like a pair of jeans and a t-shirt or something you would wear as a normal woman who doesn't want to wear the hijab. And then they started sharing videos of themselves doing so. And that led to Melika Qaragozlu's arrest. She had shared a video of herself unveiled walking around the streets, and she was arrested and remains arrested to this day. And she has been moved to a psych ward. She has been moved to a psychiatric hospital without her family being permitted to visit her at all. So all of that really had people very focused on the issue of hijab. And, it was like we were waiting for a moment to just explode over it, because it's this outward appearance of the gender apartheid regime that we have been living under for the past 40 years. And Mahsa's death really broke that illusion of safety, because we all wore the hijab, even though we didn't believe in it, because we thought it would keep us safe from the government. But seeing Mahsa's photos moments before her arrest, seeing how covered she was and how much she was complying to this rule, really broke that illusion that you could stay safe from their violence, because this is a way for them to make money through those fines, through filling up their vans and, taking women from the streets, like basically stealing women off the streets so they can do their job and get paid for filling up those vans and stuff like that. And seeing the brutality that Mahsa endured really just enraged people. And that was the moment that we were like, enough is enough. We cannot tolerate this any further.
Wow. I didn't know so much of the lead up to Mahsa's death. And it's so clear that it was, a trigger point for something that had been fomenting for some time.
Exactly, because for a very long time, people viewed it as this frivolous demand, this frivolous concern that wear the hijab, we have bigger issues. It's okay, just comply, so you should stay safe. And this is not our biggest concern and stuff like that. Some people are still like that. Throughout this protest, a lot of people have been like, hijab is not our concern. We want the regime gone. And with the regime gone, hijab will be gone. But a lot of us understand that hijab is the key to understanding the level of control this government wants to put over women and just people in general. And they want to financially gain from it even. And it came out today that a member of the parliament has suggested to freeze Iranian women's bank accounts if they don't comply with the hijab. They're trying to be as harsh as possible, and they will not stop, because this is something that they won't ever compromise on, as we've seen, and it's been established.
So when we were chatting over email ahead of time, Kiana, you had mentioned that this is an issue that a lot of women, if I'm remembering correctly, I wish I had looked it up, that this is an issue that a lot of women outside of Iran are reluctant to talk about. And that really spoke to me, because I remember when we first started talking on the Witch Please team about having a conversation about this, I was also really nervous about talking about it, because I feel like as a non-Iranian, as a non-Muslim woman, I don't know how to engage respectfully and meaningfully in this conversation. And so I was wondering if you wanted to talk a bit more about that, and what it is that, what women like us could do that would be meaningful and that would be helpful and respectful of this issue.
Yeah. The tricky piece of context I would just add there for non-Canadian listeners is that Canada, Quebec in particular, has a history of, many places in the West have a history of anti-Muslim sentiments and anti-Muslim laws. But in Canada, it has taken the form of refusing public services to women wearing the hijab, which is a sort of political forced unveiling. And so a lot of the shape the organizing takes in Canada is insisting on women's right to wear the hijab if they choose to. And the understanding that forced unveiling is also still forcing women to do things with their bodies based on the government's belief that they have the right to control women's bodies. So yeah, I would love, Kiana, to hear about sort of navigating how to protest across cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think the important thing is to realize that the movement, the protest to, help women be able to wear the hijab is so connected to the same movement in Iran that's asking to let women not wear the hijab. It's once you start focusing on the hijab itself, or the piece of cloth, you realize that it's about woman's choice, or the person's choice to wear whatever they want. That is the main thing. Yeah, so I've noticed that a lot of, feminists and, progressive people in the West that tend to speak up about different issues really quickly have not been speaking about what's going on in Iran as much. And, through this past few months, I've kind of started to understand why that is. And the reason is, it seems to be because of, the colonialism and the racist and the xenophobic history that is in the West. People in the left are trying to kind of avoid falling into those kind of discourses. So what they do instead is they move so far from it that they just can't kind of address the situation anymore.
Yeah, what they do instead is nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think it's also related to a topic that you've discussed in one of your episodes, like Orientalism, where in the past, and still, Orientalism tends to view people from regions like Iran in a negative light. So, to kind of deviate away from that, people tend to kind of go to the very opposite side, which is still othering people, which is still othering Iranian women and Iranian people. But this time they're saying that, oh, everyone from Iran is good. So, all the men from Iran are also good because, they're not, murderers and rapists and all that. So they must be good. They can't be, doing those things that they are imagined to do by, Orientalism. So when you tell these people that women are being raped in prison, women are being murdered, then they're like, oh, why are you, you're basically being racist, and you're being like, you're falling into the trap of the West, you're like spreading Western propaganda. And when we kind of argue with them, we tell them, we are Iranian, we've seen these things with our own eyes. I've seen people get beaten up in the street by the police for, just peacefully protesting. A lot of Iranian people have lost family members to the government. What tends to happen is people, if they don't know me in person, they call me a bot. They say I'm like Western propaganda bot, or like people I know in person, sometimes they block me because they just can't say anything after, I say I'm an Iranian person and like this is our experience. But it just affects their kind of worldview so much that people, this doesn't have to be Western propaganda. Bad things are happening, that they just prefer to end the discussion there. And yeah. So I think it's important to, instead of, othering us in any sort of form, just understand that we're all human, and that women's right to, choose to wear what they want, or leave the house without permission of their husband, or go to work, or leave the country, or all the things that, women in Iran can't do. This is not about cultural differences or things that, people say to kind of excuse that behavior. This is about, when you realize that we're all human and we all need to have these rights, then you'll also be able to fight for them with us, by our side, instead of kind of just watching or feeling bad or not knowing what to do or worrying about saying the wrong thing. Once you kind of strip it back, I think, everyone can kind of fight this battle together.
Yeah, thank you for that. Perfectly said. I'm wondering, Vicky, I know that there has been a lot of misinformation coming out of Iran.
Yeah.
Government misinformation that then gets repeated in the Western press. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about sort of what things are like on the ground right now.
Well, protests are still happening, and what people have been more focused on right now are nationwide strikes. And on the other hand, these were the good news, but the bad news is that the government already has started giving out death sentences to protesters. And So far, 11 people have been given death sentences, and many more are sure to come, because I think it's around like 20 or so people have been accused of crimes that are punishable by death in Islamic Republic law, such as waging war against God and corrupting the earth. And these mean that these could mean anything, honestly, whatever the government deems corrupting earth or waging war against God in this case, because the supreme leader has this like godlike status, and Iran really operates like this like cult or mafia. And what they're trying to do is scare people from joining the protests. What they're trying to do is that the strikes have really like bamboozled them, because they either want to like forcefully close down the businesses that have gone on strike, or forcefully open the businesses that have gone on strike, which doesn't mean anything. Like, they're very confused in what to do, and they keep threatening dissidents, but at the same time they're rolling back or saying stuff like the morality police is no more and stuff like that to fool the media. But morality police is the Islamic Republic itself, and the laws are still in place. And even if that sort of patrol rebrands again, we still have like university guards posted at the entrance of every single university, making sure that female students, go to classes with the quote unquote proper attire, and they would be barred from going to those classes. Or in every single workplace, there's this kind of guard that makes sure that women are dressed the way they should be and stuff like that. But so far, a lot of us have started unveiling. A lot of us have stopped just, appearing the way they want us to do, because what Mahsa's death showed us is that no matter how much you cover up, just because of being a woman and being out there, you will be punished for it, and you will be taken, because they have this like sort of quota to fill, and they have to fill up their vans. And there are, where I live and what I've heard from most other cities, is that like anti-riot forces are posted. Instead of the morality police, there are now the execution patrols posted in every single street and like busy places that might see like protests happening, or squares. And in schools right now, they're using schools to park their cars and gather their forces and stuff like that. So we see a lot of like these scary black big vehicles and these like, what we call them, cockroach dressed like police forces and stuff like that. They definitely look like cockroaches. I don't know if you've seen any footage of the protest.
Calling them police cockroaches rules.
Yeah, they were like anti-riot gear with like, the whole shebang. Yeah,
and it looks like the exoskeleton of a cockroach. So they're everywhere, and sometimes they just like patrol the streets on their motorcycles, shouting stuff like I don't know if I should say it, like it's hey dad, which is like a call to the first imam of Shia, which is supposed to like give them strength. Or they're going through the streets like trying to have this show of power. And what happened like during the World Cup was that when Iran scored goals against Wales, these same like police forces started like dancing in the streets, which was such a bizarre and absurd show of I don't know, like patriotism or something. And we were all very amused by it because essentially like the FIFA, like the football team of Iran doesn't really have any support among the people, because they didn't say a word in support of the protesters, and they bowed their head to the president days before they went for Qatar. And so the team didn't have any sort of support. And in fact, people came to the streets and celebrated when America scored goals against Iran and won. And which is such a bizarre thing to, root for the team of a different country. Like we had videos from Kurdistan, who is under so much military pressure, and They're setting fire to people's houses over there in Kurdistan, and they're getting the worst of it, honestly. But they were like out dancing in the street when America won the match against Iran. And these are the stuff that are happening. The regime doesn't really have any kind of support among people. Everyone is very much discontent with how they're doing stuff, and everyone is very much in danger, especially those detained. And there's a new hashtag, Stop Executions in Iran, which tries to name people who have been convicted and sentenced to death or are sure to be in the near future. So this is what's happening. It's a very strange time to live in, and it's very bittersweet because it's like we're starting to get our power back, but they're also retaliating in full force, and minorities are getting the worst of it.
Yeah, of course. So perhaps we can conclude, Kiana, by hearing a little bit more about what folks who are not on the ground in Iran can do to support the people and the protesters.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Iranian people, inside Iran have been fighting so bravely, and we kind of take our guide from them. And the diaspora has been kind of watching people inside of Iran, what they're doing, and also listening. I listen to all my friends and family and what they want us to do. So we've created different resources that people can use. There is a link tree on our page, Women for Iran, and it has a lot of different actions that you can take. So email templates to send to your MPs or representatives wherever you are, petitions to sign, all that kind of thing. There's resources, and yeah, if you basically just go through that, you just basically do a few clicks for each, and then it makes a massive difference. And then apart from that, just sharing on your social media, every few days at least, just like post something about everyone, just so you keep the conversation going and trending. Because we've seen from the Islamic Republic regime that when there is a tension on them, they are more fearful to kind of take drastic actions like mass execution. They have a history of doing mass executions, thousands of people at a time. But once there's international tension on them, they just normally don't tend to do that. So as long as we are there is a tension on them, which us just normal people can do by just sharing on our social media or things like that, we're helping the people inside Iran. So that's really important. And I think the most important thing for people to know is that this is not about reform. This is about a revolution. This is a full-fledged revolution, and people will not stop before that's reached, because there's a lot of misinformation actually coming from inside, as in like the government, their regime themselves, and they want to kind of portray this as reform for their survival, because as long as they say this is reform, the other world governments will have to continue kind of trading with them and dealing with them and giving them more money. But what we're asking is to stop. We're asking UK, US, Canada governments to stop giving them money, stop dealing with them, because this money will go to oppressing people and killing people, basically. Because once you accept this is a revolution, then there's no and that this is a terrorist state that's occupied Iran, there's no need to deal with them or even like speak with them. You just need to support the Iranian people by stopping any sort of money going in. There was a good sentence that said, we don't want the world governments to support us, to help us. We want them to stop helping our oppressors, which is what we're trying to do here. And I just wanted to add a final thing about why there is so much hesitance about kind of sharing and supporting and kind of thing, especially from the left, is because the Iranian government themselves are kind of using this wave of trying not to be colonialist or like racist. They are actually utilizing that for their benefit. They actually pay academics, they pay politicians, lobbyists to actually kind of advance this agenda for them, that like if people speak up in support of Iranian people, then they are actually being like colonialists.
Because I think for like since their inception, they have painted themselves as this like anti-imperialist force in the region. But what they in fact have shown with their dealings with China, Russia, Turkey, and Assad's regime is that they want imperialism for themselves. I think it's time for people to recognize them as this oppressor force with imperialistic ambitions in the region. And any sort of money you give this government and any sort of negotiations you have with this government go towards oppression of people in Iran, fomenting wars in the region, and as we've recently seen, helping Russia, for example, to bomb Ukraine, So they have the most powerful autocratic, authoritarian allies in the region, but somehow they have, painted themselves as this like anti-imperialist force. But what is very important for people to realize is that since their inception, they have executed every single leftist, every single socialist, everyone who has threatened their power. And that's how they have solidified their power in the region and have complete and utter control and grasp over every single matter of every single Iranian citizen's life. So we want the negotiations to stop because we have seen when they succeed, what happens. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Like JCPOA went into effect a few years ago and people flooded to the streets in celebration because we thought that with the partial lifting of the sanctions, our lives would be so much different, but it wasn't. And then it led to the 2019 protests when the government just started shooting at people who were protesting gas prices and egg prices and shutting down the internet and all of that. So that's just empowering this government. Any sort of negotiation is empowering this government. And my final thoughts is that don't let them fool you. And I'm very happy that we're finally part of the narrative because our experience has been one of exclusion, not being seen, not being heard. And the only time we were on the news it was because our government or supreme leader or our president had done something vile or said something horrible or denied the Holocaust or denied that gay people existed in Iran or they had opened fire on protesters and stuff like that. But Iranian women were never seen and never heard either inside or outside of Iran. So I think what we really have accomplished and what I thank you for is giving a platform to Iranian women, listening to them and having their experience as part of the narrative of the general fight against oppression and the general fight against patriarchy. That's been amazing. And that's been very heartwarming seeing all the support coming from all across the world. And it's just been moving seeing all of that.
I really want to thank both of you as well for, the very real risks that you're both taking in connecting with us and in sharing your experiences with us and in helping to clarify so much of the misinformation that is circulating and that is preventing us from really understanding what's happening. And I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Yeah. And just for the time and the generosity of everything that you've shared with us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has meant a lot to us. So yeah, thank you.
It's amazing to have a platform because it's just so many years of being not heard or listened to or not seen at all, ever. This is just amazing. And thank you guys.